The National Treasury is reconsidering its planned 0.5 percentage point increase in value-added tax and the proposed income tax bracket adjustments following growing political pressure. This reassessment comes after ActionSA supported the current budget framework, securing the African National Congress ANC's backing during a joint meeting of the Standing Committee and Select Committee on Finance at the National Council of Provinces in Cape Town. With ActionSA and the ANC holding the majority in the Standing Committee on Finance, the proposed report now urges National Treasury to explore alternative revenue generation strategies within 30 days. ActionSA's parliamentary leader, Athol Trollip, emphasized the party's commitment to responsible fiscal management, stating that they will continue to advocate for the cutting wasteful expenditure and tackling corruption rather than imposing tax increases. The party statement said ActionSA will remain focused on cutting wasteful expenditure, capping corruption, and prioritizing service delivery over reckless tax increases. We call on all stakeholders to contribute to sustainable and equitable revenue solutions that do not compromise the financial well-being of our citizens. The GA, however, criticized ActionSA, accusing the party of betraying its previous stance against the VAT hike and enabling the ANC to push forward its budget without a thorough spending review. The party said ActionSA has shamefully shut down the required government spending review. This is extremely irresponsible and will hand a blank check to the ANC to continue spending government money without review, further condemning the move as a despicable U-turn. Meanwhile, the Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, have dismissed the NCOP proceedings as deeply flawed, incoherent, and illegal. The party accused ActionSA of misleading the public, suggesting that their call for Treasury to find alternatives within 30 days does not equate to a guarantee of halting the VAT hike. In a statement, the EFF said the Economic Freedom Fighters notes the adoption of the 2025 fiscal framework and revenue proposals by the Joint Committees on Finance in what can only be described as a deeply flawed, incoherent, and legal process. The adoption undermined the Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act, which sets out the legislative process for Parliament's meaningful participation in budget making. The EFF rejects the approach taken by the committee to process report pre-drafted by the content advisors and researchers before deciding whether to accept or amend the fiscal framework and revenue proposals. This outdated and unconstitutional procedure reflects the failure of the former liberation movement to grasp that Parliament is not a rubber stamp of National Treasury's anti-poor neoliberal budget agenda. Instead of transparent process of amendments, what we witnessed was a mockery of democratic oversight. The committee adopted proposals that include a 0.5 VAT increase and allowed fiscal drag to remain in place on personal income tax, which will hurt the working class. Crucially, it is ActionSA which has compromised the poor and supported the fiscal framework and revenue proposal that include the VAT hikes in collaboration with the African National Congress and the Inkatha Freedom Party. In an exhibition of deceit, ActionSA has attempted to suggest that through their request that ought to be reflected in the Standing Committee of Finance report, which request the National Treasury must find an alternative to VAT hikes within 30 days. They have proposed an aversion or amendment of the VAT hikes. This is untrue and a desperate attempt to mislead South Africans. The VAT hike proposals are within the fiscal framework and revenue proposals which ActionSA has supported. The request to National Treasury to find alternative measures which ActionSA has made through the committee report are meaningless and will do nothing to halt hikes. Essentially, ActionSA has betrayed the poor and middle class by supporting VAT hikes through their support of the fiscal framework and revenue proposals as part of the backdoor deal with the African National Congress. Despite previous admissions that centralizing budget formulation within Treasury was a mistake, the ruling party continues to outsource fiscal sovereignty to unelected bureaucrats. What is worse is that political parties in the committee, including those in the so-called Government of National Unity, prioritized a narrow elite consensus over a developmental agenda that can transform the lives of our people. It is evident that the adopted framework is not grounded in any coherent economic vision. The parties in the DA-led coalition could not even agree amongst themselves, speaking with one voice in the committee and contradicting themselves in the public arena. This proves budget is not the product of consensus, but of desperation and backroom deals. There was a critical moment during the deliberations when the former liberation movement attempted to steamroll the process, pushing for the adoption of the fiscal framework without due regard for parliamentary procedure. But the EFF stood firm, asserting the constitutional and legislative authority of parliament. In a display of political education, EFF members had to remind the committee, including some members of the ANC, that parliament is not a ceremonial rubber stamp. Many were visibly shocked when we read aloud the relevant sections of the Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act, which clearly empower Parliament to amend the fiscal framework and revenue proposals. That moment laid bare not only the institutional decay with the ruling party, but also the EFF's firm commitment to upholding the law and defending the sovereignty of Parliament in the budget-making process. In a desperate rush to steamroll the process, the committee flagrantly violated the law by passing the required steps for amendment. The EFF stood firm and made the following concrete proposals to shift the budget towards redistributive justice. We reject the VAT increase and called for it to remain at 15% to protect the working class. We called for adjustments to personal income tax brackets to reflect inflation and protect workers from stealth tax increases. We proposed increasing corporate income tax, as well as introducing a wealth tax on underutilized land and apartheid-era trust to target inherited privilege and redistribute wealth. We called for a substantial increase in funding to SARS to boost revenue collection, particularly the recovery of the 800 billion rand debt book. On expenditure, we demanded that the Parliamentary Budget Office, PBO, be mandated to recalibrate spending in health, education, police, and defense to reverse the impact of austerity and allow the hiring of additional personnel. Finally, we proposed that this process mark the beginning of an overhaul of the entire budget framework in collaboration with the PBO and the Financial and Fiscal Commission to ensure the 2026-2027 amendments reflect a decisive shift towards social spending and infrastructure investment. The EFF is unapologetic in rejecting the budget surplus obsession imposed by National Treasury. If reversing inequality and mass unemployment leads to a wider deficit, so be it. We will not be complicit in fiscal policies that sacrifice black lives for credit ratings. The EFF reaffirms its commitment to radical economic transformation, and we will continue to fight inside and outside Parliament for a budget that reflects the will of the people, not the interest of capital. The Umkhonto Party also released a statement opposing the 2025 fiscal framework and revenue proposals. The statement reads as follows: The Umkhonto Party strongly opposes the 2025 fiscal framework and revenue proposals as tabled by the Minister of Finance. The MK Party believes that the proposed measures fall short of providing a sustainable and equitable solution for all South Africans. Firstly, the economic growth projections put forward by the National Treasury are overly optimistic. The forecast of a 1.9% GDP growth rate in 2025 does not adequately account for the persistent structural challenges and geopolitical risks that continue to hinder our economic progress. Historical data shows that our GDP growth has averaged less than 1% since 2012, and recent years have seen even lower growth rates. It is imperative that we adopt more realistic and prudent economic focus to ensure that our fiscal planning is grounded in reality. Secondly, the proposed increase in the VAT rate by 0.5 percentage points in 2025 and 2026 is deeply concerning. VAT is a regressive tax that disproportionately impacts low and middle-income households, exacerbating poverty and inequality. The National Treasury's jurisdiction that high-income households pay more VAT in absolute terms fails to address the significant burden this tax places on the most vulnerable members of our society. We must explore alternative revenue sources that do not further erode household purchasing power and suppress consumer spending. Moreover, the decision not to adjust personal income tax brackets for inflation is another regressive measure that will strain already struggling households. This approach disproportionately affects lower and middle income groups, pushing them into higher tax brackets and reducing their disposable income. It is essential that we review PIT tables annually to ensure that the inflation does not automatically increase the tax burden on these taxpayers. The proposed fiscal strategy continues to emphasize fiscal consolidation despite its failure to stabilize debts and deficits over the past decade. The National Treasury's admission that this approach has not achieved its intended objectives should prompt a re-evaluation of our fiscal policy. We need a more expansive fiscal policy that enhances household resilience, stimulates aggregate demand, and addresses pressing social needs. Furthermore, the high levels of debt to GDP and rapidly increasing debt service costs are alarming. Gross loan debt is projected to reach 6.8 trillion rand by 2027-2028. With debt service costs crowding out essential social expenditure, we must develop a clear, transparent, and credible debt reduction strategy to ensure fiscal sustainability without compromising public services. Thirdly, while we appreciate the additional allocation to SARS to enhance its capacity to collect unpaid taxes, we remain concerned about the institution's underfunding and its ability to close the tax gap effectively. SARS estimates a tax gap of 700 to 800 billion rand annually, and even with 30% recovery rate, this could yield significant additional revenue. It is crucial that we support SARS in its efforts to modernize systems, improve enforcement, and increase revenue collection. We strongly believe that the 2025 fiscal framework and revenue proposals do not provide a balanced and equitable approach to addressing our fiscal challenges. We must prioritize measures that support economic growth, job creation, youth unemployment, empowerment of SMMEs, protect vulnerable households, and ensure fiscal sustainability. The Umkhonto Party has proposed amendments to the provision of the Act that empowers the Minister to make pronouncements, and it comes into effect without the deliberation and adoption by the committee. The current legislation of VAT Act of 1991 and the PFMA of 1994 contains clauses that renders the committee useless in protecting the public in terms of VAT increase pronouncements by the minister. In summary, we object to the proposed budget and call for the amendment of the fiscal framework and revenue proposal and reject any VAT increase. To provide immediate relief to the working class, we call for adjustment of personal income tax brackets to accommodate inflation changes. The Umkhonto Party has proposed alternative measures that work towards a budget that truly serves the interest of all South Africans. Our fiscal framework and revenue proposals, including 6 funding options, are as follows. 1. Strengthen SARS to recover 800 billion rand from tax evaders. The South African Revenue Service must be adequately resourced to track down and recover the estimated 800 billion rand lost to tax evasion. The Umkhonto Party government will invest in technology, forensic audits, and enforcement to ensure that all individuals and corporations pay their fair share, and elicit financial outflows and transfer pricing manipulation. South Africa loses billions due to multinational corporations shifting profits offshore through transfer pricing. The Umkhonto Party will clamp down on these illicit financial flows, ensuring that wealth generated in South Africa benefits South Africans. Implement a wealth tax. The extreme inequality in South Africa demands bold action. A progressive wealth tax will ensure that the ultra-rich contribute contribute fairly to the economic and help fund essential services